One napkin untouched, one life undone. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Drop your city below. I always read your comments. Wolfe's sharp eye will unfold it. If you want to disrupt the brownstone, don't bring a bomb, bring a schedule. The explosive radius on Wolfe's routine runs to every corner of the house, and the shrapnel is calendar pages. At 11 on the dot, he is with the orchids. At 1, he is at the table. Between those times lives a thin strip of civilization that includes coffee, dictation, and me trying to keep the world, with all its messy habits, on our side of the door without getting any on the carpet. Fritz had just set down an omelette that could have had its portrait hung in a museum. 2 eggs from Wilfley Farm, Morel's, a soft opinion of butter, when the doorbell rang. The chime has a modest voice, but it manages to sound like obnoxious destiny when you hear it at breakfast. "Ignore it," Wolfe said, without looking up from the omelette. He had just forked the edge with the meticulous attention he gives to anything that tries to be perfect. "I would," I told him, "but ignoring human beings at the door is my job, and I'm already fully employed today. We could hire a second me for the heavy ignoring." He made a sound that could have been approval or a fly coughing. "Pooh, if it is the man with the ginger snaps, relief is near. If it is not, send it away." I opened the door. The visitor was neither a ginger snap nor a man. It was a parcel, flat, square, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, no return address. The messenger had left it on the stoop as if even he didn't want to take credit for the delivery. I looked up and down the street. East 35th pretended innocence like a cat with feathers in its mouth. Nobody claimed authorship. I carried the package to the office. Wolfe, whose eyebrows have an independent life, raised the left one. "I'm as unhappy as you are," I said. "It's not ticking. If it explodes, I'll shield you with my body, unless I remember something I need to do in the kitchen." Fritz, pausing in the doorway with the coffee pot, went pale at the idea of me entering his domain for anything more complicated than ice. Wolfe grunted. "Open it." I used my thumbnail on the string. Inside was a sheet of tissue, and inside that, laid as carefully as a saint's relic, a white linen napkin. Not paper, not cotton. Linen, fine and old-fashioned, with a faint stitched border and a corner that had once carried an embroidered sigil, carefully unpicked. In the upper hem there was the ghost of an initial, maybe an A. Or maybe I wanted to see an A, which is a dangerous habit for a detective or a lover. But what made it weird wasn't what it had. It was what it didn't have. A linen napkin, pressed and put away, should carry the memory of a fold, the neat vertical that tells you it lived a previous life in a drawer. This one didn't. It lay as flat and innocent as snow. No crease, no history. Fritz stepped in, set the coffee down like a sacrament, and made the small sound a professional makes when he sees another professional's work. "Good linen," he observed. "Belgian, or possibly Irish. Old loom. Very fine." Wolfe kept eating, which is his method of pretending not to care while caring. "Irish," he said, "from the hand and the handkerchief smell. Newer starch, however, and scorched once, clumsily. He dabbed his mouth with his own napkin, which did have a fold because we are not savages, and set the fork aside. "What else?" "Nothing else," I said. "No note, no calling card, no messenger ready to confess. Just the cloth." "Examine the hem," Wolfe said. "Archie." "Yes, sir." I turned the corner over. The unpicked sigil had left tiny bite marks in the weave. Whoever removed it knew how to pick a stitch, but was in a hurry. On the reverse, a thread tail had been broken, not cut. "They were nervous," I said. "Or clumsy." "Nervous," Wolfe said. "Clumsy people aren't precise enough to remove an emblem without scarring the cloth. Nervous people are precise until they aren't." He leaned back. "Fritz, the coffee. Archie, the door." "The door?" I said. Yes, we will presently be visited by the person who dispatched this trespass. He flicked 2 fingers toward the napkin as if it had committed a misdemeanor. And I use the word advisedly. Sending the thing was a trespass. Whoever did so presumes on my curiosity. You've got it, I said. I'm not admitting that. He closed his eyes. But it is too well done to be random. Go, Archie. I went. Right on cue. Wolfe's cue, not fate's. The bell rang again. This time a human being stood on the stoop. She was 30 if life had been fair to her, and 35 if it hadn't. Life had been trying both options and couldn't decide. Good coat, inexpensive shoes, a hat that made the right promises and then kept them. She had gray eyes that weren't tired so much as economizing on attention. The carton she carried was the size of a bakery cake box. She held it with both hands and watched me with the alert, steady look of someone who had reached the cliff's edge and was willing to keep walking if she measured it correctly. "Mr. Wolfe," she said. "He's in," I told her. "Do you have a reservation? The maitre d' is impossible." "I'm Lydia Marlowe," she said. She looked down at the box, re-evaluated her plan, and recalibrated in mid-air. "I've brought something for Mr. Wolfe, and I need to speak with him. It's personal." "They all say that," I said. "Come in." In the office, she took in the room, the great desk, the globe, the red leather, the chair that has broken stronger men than I, and then took in Wolfe. She didn't gasp or have second thoughts. She was one of the ones who'd done their reading. She set the box on the edge of the client chair, then thought better of it and lifted the lid. Inside, nested in tissue like the twin of the one on Wolfe's desk, lay another napkin. Same linen, same whiteness. This one had a fold and a stain, a precise oblong the color of weak tea, dead center, like a fingerprint left by a ghost. Wolfe's eyelids moved, which is his version of springing to his feet. "So," he said, "one that refuses to remember and one that refuses to forget." She exhaled. "Then you see it." "I see many things," he said. "What I do not see is why, since you possess one, you trespassed the other into my house. Explain." Lydia Marlowe sat carefully, like a person who has been balancing on other people's expectations for so long that solid furniture is a novelty. "I manage the cloister room," she said. "It's a private supper club on West 53rd. We serve 20 at a time. Linen, silver, a menu that changes with the moon. Our members believe they are discreet. They are not." Wolfe's mouth did an almost smile. The cloister room I knew by reputation, a shrine where those who liked their appetites flattered and their secrets guarded went to feel both superior and absolved. "Last Thursday," she said, "the head waiter set up the table 4. That napkin," she pointed to the one with the stain, "was folded as a rectangle, like all the others. At the end of service, when we counted linens, it came back with a mark, as if someone had pressed a damp rectangle there. Too small for a saucer, too neat for a spill. Chef said it smelled faintly of clove and lemon, like furniture oil." "Polish," Wolfe said. "Or a cleaner for wood. Yes, the cloister room has paneled walls and a carved sideboard that someone rubs every afternoon as if to keep the place from telling on them." "And the other napkin?" I asked, indicating the immaculate, history-free one. "Found in our laundry basket the next morning. No fold, that is impossible." She said it without drama. "We fold them before they go out. The laundry folds them before they come back. This one had never been folded at all. It had been ironed flat, unnaturally flat, as if someone wanted to erase where it had been. Also impossible. The embroidery. We had the initials CR on every piece. That one," she nodded at ours, "with its tiny ghosts where the stitching had been, is one of ours, but someone unpicked the initials before it appeared." Wolfe closed his eyes and put his fingertips together. "Your club keeps a roster of members, 20 by night, perhaps 100 by week. Staff? 12, she said. Chef, sous, pastry. 4 on the floor, bartender, dishwasher, me, and a silent partner who's only silent in the paperwork. And your interest? Wolfe asked mildly. This is an annoyance for a manager and a fetish for a laundress. Why bring it to me? Because 2 things happened in the same 48 hours, she said. 1. Someone tried to break into our office after hours. They failed, but not for lack of trying. 2. The only copy of our membership addendum, our quiet arrangement with certain members, vanished. It lists dietary preferences, yes, but also other preferences. Discretionary seating, which wives do not meet which women, which men do not meet which men, that sort of preference. Ah, Wolfe's eyes opened. And you believe someone is warning you by means of linen? No? She looked at the napkins as if they were witnesses. I think someone is telling me they can erase what matters and preserve what harms. They've shown me both tricks, the fold that isn't and the stain that won't lift. I liked her phrasing, but this wasn't a poetry contest. Why us? I asked. There are other detectives who'd happily iron moral creases for money. She hesitated and looked at Wolfe. Because you are famous for refusing to be moved. In my business, everybody is moved, by pressure, by favor, by appetite. I need someone who will not budge. And she stopped. And, Wolfe said. And because the silent partner approached me this morning, she said, he told me to let it go. He said the napkins were a nuisance and the attempted break was kids. Then he smiled and mentioned you, by name. He said if I was foolish enough to make noise, you would turn it into thunder. He said you don't rise from your chair, but you make other people fall out of theirs. Wolfe's mouth made a small, private shape. He hated flattery, except when it came in the form of food. Who is your silent partner? He asked. Arthur L. Greening, she said, and watched Wolfe as if that might land. He invests in restaurants and in other appetites. I saw the eyebrow again. Wolfe knew the name. He didn't offer it a chair. Archie, he said, write a receipt. Miss Marlowe will leave both napkins. Then you will take her statement. Names of staff, members present Thursday, anyone with keys, and the contact for the laundry service. Fritz, he paused, which he doesn't do when it's only coffee. Fritz, ask Mr. Browning to bring the car around at noon. That was new. Wolfe doesn't ask for the car at noon unless he intends to insult the orchids. You intend to go out? I asked. No, he said, but I intend for the car to be visible. Some people need to believe thunder has wheels. He looked at Lydia. Miss Marlowe, I accept your case. She sagged and then snapped upright again, because some people practice grace as a religion. On what terms? My terms, Wolfe said. A retainer of $1,000, expenses extra, and absolute obedience within the law. I will not protect the appetites of your members, but I will protect your house if I choose. He gestured delicately at the napkins like a preacher indicating the text. This trespass displeases me. I wrote the receipt, took the names, got the laundry's address, and added a note that the head waiter, one Paul Neary, was a man with a temper that flickered like a pilot light. Lydia signed, left the money, and, after one more cool look at Wolfe, left the brownstone with the box under her arm, lighter by 2 linens and $1,000. When the door closed, the room sighed, which is the brownstone's way of asking if equilibrium will ever be allowed again. I'm surprised, I said. Napkins aren't your usual trigger, unless they're holding sauerbraten in. Wolfe's eyes had gone to the higher shelves of his mind. Archie, he said, do not mistake the implement for the message. Erasure and persistence. Someone signals that they can remove an emblem and keep a stain. Miss Marlowe thinks the signal is about her club. It is not. I took my notebook. Then what is it about? Me, he said simply. The second trespass was not the delivery to the cloister room, it was the delivery to this house. He tapped the history-free napkin. There is a person who considers himself cunning. He believes that by sending me an errand dressed as linen, he can make me pick up the thread he wants. We shall allow him to think so. You didn't ask who he is, I pointed out. I intend, he said, to make him volunteer. He closed his eyes, considering. We shall begin modestly. You will visit the cloister room and look at their sideboard. The stain-maker used a rectangle with clove and lemon, likely a sample tin. Measure the dimensions. Speak to the head waiter, Neri. Speak to the laundry. Verify who unpicked the initials. No little elf does that for free. And ask Arthur L. Greening to dine at our table tomorrow. I blinked. Here? You're inviting the silent partner to see how loud silence can be? Precisely. He leaned back. And Archie? Yes? Fold that napkin. He nodded at the immaculate trespasser. As you would, absent instruction. I lifted the cloth. It lay too flat, resistant as ice. I began the neat rectangle I've been doing since I learned to keep Wolfe's table. At the last move, when the final crease should have found its way home, the linen remembered nothing and fought. The line wouldn't take. I pressed harder, then stopped. You don't wrestle linen in Wolfe's office. It won't fold, I said. It will, he said. Under heat and pressure, facts are like that. Some require an iron. In this case, the iron will be time. Until then, leave it as it is, so we remember what it refuses to admit. He opened his eyes long enough to look bored with humanity. And Archie, call Saul. Already on it, I said, reaching for the phone. And if thunder needs wheels, I'll have Ori stick a lightning decal on the car. Phooey, he said, closing his eyes. No decals. So the pie. Brownstone was disturbed not by a murder or a scream, but by a square of cloth that insisted on being innocent. I've seen worse alibis. We had a club with secrets, a partner who preferred quiet, a waiter with a temper, a laundry with a tricky conscience, and someone who could both unpick an emblem and set a stain that wouldn't fade. Wolfe had taken the case, and not for money. He'd taken it because someone had tried to send a message through our air, which is the one trespass even linen can't soften. Fritz packed me a sandwich on the grounds that civilization requires ballast, and I left the brownstone with the immaculate napkin folded as far as it would tolerate inside a manila envelope. Wolfe says thunder needs wheels. In our case, thunder was a reliable sedan with a back seat that had carried more suspects than groceries. I called Saul from the curb and gave him the outlines. Club, linen, greening, laundry, waiter. He made the sound he makes when a job will pay, but won't be pleasant. You want me on the laundry or the money? He asked. Start with the money, I told him. Find out how Greening dresses his appetites, then drift by the cloister room around 5 and watch who picks which chair. Midday put West 53rd under a polite glare, the kind Manhattan saves for places that like to look private in the dark. The cloister room's door was painted a civilized green, nothing to startle the neighbors. Inside it smelled of polish, citrus, and old ambition. A hostess in black gave me a look calibrated to estimate credit limits, then adjusted to a smile when I said Lydia Marlowe's name. Lydia came out of an office that had a window into the dining room and a mirror to let her see what the window missed. She was brisk and less fragile in daylight. Table 4, she said without prelude, and led me out. Daylight crawled across the paneled walls and found nothing to complain about. Table 4 had linen as crisp as an alibi, and glassware that wanted to be lifted by people who liked to hear themselves talking. The sideboard, I said. She took me to it, a handsome piece with drawers like secrets and a top with a gentle sheen. I leaned, breathed, and got clove and lemon with a back note of beeswax. There was a faint rectangular dimness near the right corner. If you didn't know to see it, you wouldn't. Dimensions, I asked. She handed me a server's ruler from a drawer. Somebody here was organized. I held it against the dimness. 4 inches by 6 1/4, I said. Not a coaster. Too neat for a glass bottom. A sample tin? Lydia asked. Could be, I said. Furniture polishers come in little flats when they want to make you feel artisanal. Did anyone come near this during service? The captain, she said. Neri. He rests his soul in the wood between courses. Most of them do. But he's not careless. Is he the one with the temper? Her mouth stalled. On a yes and steered into neutral. He is exacting. Those 2 words are cousins, I said. Where is he? In the waiter's station. Counting knives he already counted. He does that when he's thinking. Paul Neri was thin in the way that happens when your job is to make other people feel well fed. His hair was the color you get by giving up. He had hands that hovered an inch above things, as if touch would be extravagant. He glanced at me, decided I was not a customer, and resumed arranging forks by conviction. You counted those, I said. I count until I stop disliking the number, he said, not looking up. I'm Goodwin, I said. Marlowe brought Wolfe a puzzle. I want to know who had table 4. The patrons? He shrugged in tiny. A young banker who wishes to look like a farmer. A woman who wears pearls as a hobby. 2 men from a charity with expense accounts. A novelist who doesn't write here. And a gentleman who is not a gentleman. Name? Which would you like? His hands were still. The last one. He looked at me, then past me, where Lydia stood small but present. Miss Marlowe, he said. Do we tell the detective what he can learn by asking the laundry boy? We tell him what will save time, she said. Neri's mouth went flat. Mr. Greening brought a guest, he said. The guest drank Sancerre as if he were practicing, asked for no onions, and spoke to the table as if it were a dog that had not performed. He rested a tin on the sideboard when he came in, because his jacket is cut to pretend he doesn't carry things. What kind of tin? Flat, old-fashioned, the sort of thing you leave near shoes. He moved it without thinking and replaced it without care. That is how people carry their sins. What did it say on the lid? I didn't read it. I read hands. And the laundry? The boy brought the baskets back at 7. He is 17 on his good days. He smokes when he thinks we aren't looking, and he likes the girl from pastries. He did not unpick initials. Who did? Neri slid the last fork into alignment. The initials were not on the napkin. It came to us without a past. We collect linen by count, not by love. If a piece arrives that looks like ours, we do not argue with housekeeping. Who handles housekeeping? Mrs. Donnelly. She has been here since before this place became this place. His eyes flicked to Lydia again. And she would rather die than admit a piece of linen exists if it can be a problem. Then I'll talk to her, I said, and left him to renegotiate the integers. Mrs. Donnelly had grayed like a glacier and moved with the certainty of someone who knows where the closets really are. Her office smelled of starch and the last warning. When I put the manila envelope on her desk and slid out the napkin with no fold, she gave it a look that would have sent any self-respecting cloth to the incinerator. That isn't ours, she said. It is, I said. It used to say CR in the corner, and then it didn't. That mark could be anything. Sure, coincidentally in the exact corner your embroidery team uses. We don't have an embroidery team, she snapped, then clamped it. We had initials put on when we opened. The man is dead. He did beautiful work. Someone else did work too, I said. With a picker and a hurry. Who brought this in? Nobody, she said. It was there. Where? In the Thursday basket. Who checked the baskets? She hesitated half a heart. I did. And Neri. We count in pairs. Then here's the pair, I said. Either the laundry sent you a counterfeit that looks exactly like your linen minus the letters, or someone put a counterfeit in your basket after you counted, or someone under your roof is laundering more than napkins. She held my eyes like we were on a high wire. Mr. Goodwin, she said low. "This is a quiet room. People pay to be kept in it. If something has found its way in that is not ours, then it is not ours. That is the rule." "I understand rules," I said. "I enforce one at home. But here's another. When someone carries a stain to your door and erases your name from your cloth, they aren't following your rules. They're writing theirs." I slid the napkin back, the envelope writing shotgun. "We'll need the laundry's bins from Thursday, the staff schedule, and the list of members present." "You will need a court order," she said. "I'll settle for Wolfe." She didn't say pay for your eye, but it hung in the air like a borrowed word. "I'll speak to Miss Marlowe." "You do that." Outside, I called Saul. He had his smile on, the one I can hear. "Greening keeps an office on Madison," he said. "Nothing fancy. He's in 3 partnerships that own parts of 5 restaurants, 2 in Midtown, 1 in Tribeca, 1 that failed in Brooklyn, and our new friend. He's known for 2 things: keeping appetites fed and outliving his accountants. He had lunch today with a lawyer named Venn." "Venn?" I said. "As in diagrams?" "Leo Venn. Quiet work on quiet contracts. He did a divorce 2 years ago where the wife never showed up and still got the Park Avenue place." "Get me a seat near his dinner if he eats in his own club," I said. "And have a look at the laundry service, whether they sub out embroidery or Already sent a boy," Saul said. "He'll charm the clerk or marry her. You want me on Greening tonight?" "No," I said. "Wolfe wants Greening at our table tomorrow. I'll make the call." I went back to the brownstone with the sun leaning west. Wolfe was in the office with the noon car key on his desk like an ornament that had done its duty. He listened without moving anything but an eyebrow. "Marlowe told you Greening's guest?" he asked. "She didn't. Neri didn't know his name, only his manners and his tin. 4 by 6 1/4 on the sideboard. Clove and lemon. Mrs. Donnelly denies linen like St. Peter, and the napkin appeared in the basket after a 2-person count." "Not after," Wolfe murmured. "Between. The addendum vanishes in the night. A napkin appears by morning with its name removed. The first tells us someone has a key to secrets. The second tells us someone wants us to see a skill." "Greening. He's too practiced to show us his hand," Wolfe said, "but he may show us his guest." He looked at the telephone as if it were going to ring in apology. "Call Mr. Greening. Invite him to dine tomorrow at 7. Tell him we will serve squab. And tell Fritz to prepare 2 sauces, 1 with clove and lemon. You want a confession on the nose?" "I want a memory to wake," he said. "People betray themselves to appetites. When the room smells like their sin, they speak." I dialed Greening. His secretary was one of those who can nod over the phone. When I said Wolfe, the line went from winter to spring. Greening came on in a voice oiled for comfort. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "how edible of you." "Mr. Greening," I said, "Mr. Wolfe invites you to dine tomorrow at 7. "How flattering," he said. "And why?" "Because you enjoy appetites and he enjoys principles. It's educational when the 2 pass the salt." He laughed because he likes to. I wouldn't miss it. When I hung up, Wolfe looked nearly pleased, which is his version of a handshake. He pointed at the envelope on my desk. "And the napkin?" "Still refusing to fold," I said. "Good," he said. "It will keep us honest." I sat, and the office went quiet in that special brownstone way that feels like a stage waiting for the curtain. Somewhere out in the city, a man who liked tins and neat stains would smell clove and lemon tomorrow and remember where to put his hands. If he was the kind who erased initials for fun, he might even think he could do it in our house. And if he tried, he'd learn what linen learns under an iron. I didn't need to tell Wolfe what Greening had said on the phone. He could hear tone through glass if he chose to. Still, I gave him the polite version. Wolfe grunted once, which for him is equal to a telegram reading. Proceed with caution. He had gone upstairs for his session with the orchids, leaving me with the file of notes, the envelope with the defiant napkin, and the question of what tomorrow's dinner would dig out of a man who didn't like his initials stitched into anything. I just finished sharpening 2 pencils, Wolfe's idea of preparation, when the doorbell rang. This time it wasn't linen or a woman balancing on her dignity. It was Saul. He walked in like he owned the air but was willing to lease it. I'd told him to check Greening's connections, but when Saul grins at the door that early, it means he found a second story nobody asked for. "You owe me pie," he said, dropping into the red chair that squeaks like a guilty conscience. "I owe you nothing but admiration. Start talking." He stretched, lighting a cigarette with the relaxed air of a man who'd been chasing shadows and found one smoking a cigar. "Laundry girl's name is Millie Raines. She's been working there 2 years. 21, no record. She says a man came to her counter Friday morning asking if she had seen any linens come in from the cloister room without markings. He was polite, bought a packet of mints, didn't push. But he asked twice, different ways. She remembered because nobody cares about napkins except the people who ruin them. That narrows it to 3 suspects. A collector, a blackmailer, or a fetishist, I said. She described him. Saul went on. Tall, square shoulders, grey overcoat with a fur collar, hat brim low. She said his voice was smooth but like it was holding a cough. He left her a tip. Not cash, a clove candy. Said she had a sweet face. I felt the back of my neck stiffen. Clove. That was our stain and our sideboard. He's advertising himself. Or rehearsing, Saul said. And there's more. Greening's lawyer Venn didn't just have lunch with him today. They met last week too. Topic was dissolution of partnership. Quiet, off the books. Venn pulled the records. Greening's been moving pieces around. Dissolving partnerships and planting linen, I said. He's diversifying hobbies. Saul shook his head. Greening's too smooth. He wouldn't be seen tipping a laundry girl candy. He keeps his hands clean. This other man, he's making creases or erasing them. Wolfe came down then, settling like a boulder into the yellow chair. He looked at Saul, then at me. Well, I gave him the condensed version. He listened, eyes half closed, tapping one finger against the armrest as if counting beats in a music only he could hear. When I finished, he spoke like a man dictating to posterity. An adversary has staged a play with props of linen. One napkin erases its identity, another retains a blemish that resists. The message is unsubtle, that what he chooses to hide will vanish, and what he chooses to stain will persist. And now he has left his signature twice. Clove, lemon. He wishes to be recognized. He's reckless, I said. No, Wolfe replied. He is confident. Confidence is more dangerous. Fritz entered to announce dinner, which meant we had 10 minutes to put the universe back in its drawer. Saul left with instructions to tail Greening's guest list at the cloister room. Wolfe and I sat to squab in advance of tomorrow's performance, while I thought about a man who pressed candy into the hands of laundry girls and left polished stains in private clubs. That night, in my room, I wrote up the day's notes. I like to keep records even when Wolfe claims memory suffices. The cloister room sideboard, the 4x6 tin, Nery's pointed descriptions, Mrs. Donnelly's denial, Saul's Candyman, Greening's dinner date tomorrow. All of it felt like threads in a weave somebody else had started and expected Wolfe to finish. Morning in the brownstone was quiet until it wasn't. At 10, I picked up the phone to hear a voice that had been trained to sound calm but had forgotten the trick. It was Lydia Marlowe. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "we've had another incident." I looked at the clock. Wolfe was still upstairs with the orchids, and dragging him down before 11 would count as a felony in some states. "Tell me." "In the office," she whispered. "Our file drawers. Nothing missing this time, but each drawer had one thing altered. A letter unfolded, a bill refolded wrong, a menu copy missing its crease. Small things, but enough to know someone had been there. Locks? I asked. Unbroken. Keys untouched. I keep one, Neri the other. No signs of entry. Then they had a key, I said. Or they wanted us to think so. I promised her we'd come, hung up and relayed the message when Wolfe descended. He listened, and for the first time since the napkin appeared, he looked almost irritated. "Archie," he said, "you will go. Take the napkin that refuses to fold. Place it on her desk. If our adversary is watching, as I suspect, he will respond. He cannot resist rehearsal." "And if he does more than rehearse?" I asked. "Then he will commit," Wolfe said. "And once he commits, he belongs to me." I took the envelope, my hat, and the day's patience. At the cloister room, Lydia's office was a landscape of order disrupted. Papers looked right until you looked twice. It was as if an invisible hand had sat down and rehearsed the act of being careless. She saw me place the envelope on her desk and gave me a look that mixed hope with suspicion. "You're using bait," she said. "Bait works best when the fish thinks it's his idea," I told her. She pressed her lips, then said, "If this goes wrong." "It will," I said, "but Wolfe enjoys it that way." I left the napkin there, flat and stubborn. Outside in the dining room, Neri arranged forks again, while Mrs. Donnelly passed with a tray of folded linen, eyes front, spine stiff. Somewhere in that room, or in the city watching it, a man with clove candies and erased initials was waiting for us to notice him again. And tomorrow night, when the brownstone served squab under clove and lemon, he'd have no excuse not to. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, feet planted like roots, fingers steepled. I gave him the account of Lydia's office, how the files had been disturbed but not stolen, and how the napkin now sat on her desk like a stage prop waiting for its cue. He listened with the kind of attention that looks like disinterest if you don't know him. At the end, he opened his eyes a fraction wider, which meant I had told him something he already suspected. "The intruder rehearses," he said. "He repeats gestures, unfolding, refolding, misplacing, to show us he can. It is a language. He speaks in creases." "Then maybe we should hire a translator," I said. "One who charges by the wrinkle." "Puis, you will observe. Tonight Saul will remain at the cloister room until closing. You will join him. Whoever placed those alterations will not resist checking his work. People who crave recognition crave it twice." "Great. I'll sit with Saul and watch forks get counted. I live for glamour." "Do not be glib," Wolfe said. "The man is not reckless. He is deliberate. He wishes to measure our response. We must measure his." That ended my chance of an early night. I ate Fritz's roast beef like a condemned man and went out to relieve Saul at the cloister room. By 11 the club was empty, the dining room dark, but the office lights glowed faintly. Lydia had gone home, leaving her desk with a stubborn napkin waiting on it. Saul lounged in the alley with a cigarette that looked casual, and wasn't. "Nothing yet," he said. 2 deliveries came, both legit. Neri went home at 10. Mrs. Donnelly left before him. The lock hasn't been touched. "Then we wait," I said. We did. Midnight crawled by, then 1. At 1:30, movement flickered in the narrow window above the alley. A shadow leaned, hesitated, and pulled back. Saul dropped his cigarette, crushed it, and nodded. I went in through the front, key courtesy of Lydia. Inside, the office door stood ajar. The envelope lay on her desk, but the napkin wasn't where I'd left it. It had been lifted, turned, and laid flat again, only this time there was a new detail. A tiny square of folded paper resting dead center. I didn't touch it. Saul joined me, eyes narrowing at the sight. "That wasn't there," he said. "No," I said, "and I bet it's exactly what he wanted us to find." The paper was plain, folded with obsessive care, and inside, when I opened it with a pencil, there were 4 words written in ink that bled faintly on the fibers. Some folds never fade. No signature, no flourish, just the phrase, tucked like a calling card. Saul swore softly. "He's playing with you." "With Wolfe," I corrected. "I'm just the courier." We left the paper where it was, locked the office, and by 2 I was back in the brownstone. Wolfe was awake, of course, and took the news with a small grunt of satisfaction, as if an opponent had finally spoken loud enough to be heard. He examined the paper with more reverence than he'd shown the napkin. "Observe the hand," he said. "Small, neat, but the ink blot betrays pressure. He presses hard, concealing strain. A man who wishes to look calm but bears weight. The words, ambiguous. They refer both to linen and to memory. Our adversary suggests that while some emblems can be erased, others endure despite effort. Which is supposed to scare us?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said. "To entice us. He believes himself clever. He invites us to pursue the trail he has left, expecting admiration." He leaned back. "Archie, call Mr. Greening, confirm his attendance this evening. Inform him the menu is final." I did. Greening's voice came through smooth as butter left in sunlight. "Wouldn't miss it," he said again. The day crawled in Wolfe's methodical way. He saw no clients, issued no further instructions, and seemed content to let me stew while Saul tailed shadows. Fritz worked in the kitchen, and by late afternoon the aroma of squab roasted with clove and lemon filled the brownstone. Wolfe emerged in the dining room only to taste the sauces, his expression shifting minutely until he nodded once. That meant perfection, which Fritz had expected. At 7 sharp, the bell rang. Greening entered with the kind of smile that pretends to be modest. He was tall, elegant, and his coat draped like it had been tailored in apology for the man inside. His eyes, pale and watchful, flicked around the office and landed on Wolfe, who didn't rise. "Mr. Wolfe," he said warmly. "A pleasure." "Sit," Wolfe said. "We will eat shortly. First, introductions. This is Mr. Goodwin, my assistant. You know him by telephone." Greening inclined his head to me. His handshake, when I gave him mine, was soft, careful, as if he were afraid to leave an impression. He smelled faintly, not of polish, but of something sharper, almost medicinal. We sat at the table. Fritz served the squab with sauces placed discreetly, one ordinary, one with the scent Wolfe had prescribed. Greening carved with precision, but when the plate came near the clove and lemon, I saw his shoulders pause, just for a second. He covered it with a remark about vintages, but Wolfe had seen it. Wolfe sees everything. "Mr. Greening," Wolfe said once we were served, "your establishment has been troubled by intrusions." Greening lifted an eyebrow. "Lydia has been nervous. Too many secrets in one building will do that." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "and secrets require custodians. But someone has chosen to advertise his ability to erase or to stain. A trifling skill, but dangerous in its arrogance." Greening's fork paused over the sauce. "Arrogance is rarely trifling." "Quite," Wolfe said. "Would you care to tell me why one napkin arrived at my house without its emblem and another with its blemish?" For the first time, Greening smiled with teeth. "Because someone wants you to know, Mr. Wolfe, that linen is not the only thing that can be altered. People can be made to forget, or to remember. And sometimes—" He dipped the squab into the clove sauce and tasted it, eyes narrowing at the flavor. "Sometimes memory is the sharper weapon." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was waiting. Wolfe didn't move, but I could tell he had taken the measure of Greening, and that the evening was about to become more than dinner. I sat back, ready, because when Wolfe sets a table, it isn't just for food. It's for battle. Greening swallowed his mouthful of squab with the serenity of a man who thinks he's given a sermon and expects the collection plate to come around. Wolfe, immovable behind the curve of his chair, studied him in silence long enough to make me want to cough, just to prove sound still worked in the room. Fritz had withdrawn, and it was just the three of us, with the scent of clove and lemon hanging in the air like a private challenge. "You speak with conviction," Wolfe said finally, his tone so mild it could have been mistaken for agreement. "But you offer generalities, Mr. Greening. Memory, forgetting, weapons. These are abstractions. What I require is substance." Greening's pale eyes glinted. "Substance is dangerous currency, Mr. Wolfe. You of all men know that. A name written where it shouldn't be, a stain on a page, a fold in the wrong direction, that's enough to ruin reputations, families, even businesses. And in my line of work, patrons pay for the privilege of safety." I leaned forward. "Funny way to keep them safe, by dropping linen without initials into their laundry and leaving calling cards about folds. If you want to reassure people, you don't sneak into their offices and rearrange their files." He turned his gaze on me, polite but dismissive, like a man addressing the wine steward rather than the guest of honor. "Sometimes, Mr. Goodwin, fear is the only teacher worth hiring. If one of my members is reminded that his life could crease in the wrong direction with a single careless move, he pays all the more dearly to keep it smooth." I whistled softly. "So that's your racket. Scare the customers, then sell them calm." "Archie," Wolfe said without raising his voice, "do not interrupt." Greening smiled as though Wolfe had just defended his honor. "Your assistant is perceptive." "Yes, reassurance is valuable, but only if the threat feels real." Wolfe closed his eyes, fingertips touching, and for a long moment he might have been asleep. "I know better. That's when the hooks go in." "You're saying," Wolfe murmured, "that the incidents, the stained napkin, the foldless one, the tampered files, are orchestrated performances, threats staged to appear as intrusions, when in fact they are advertisements." "Precisely." Greening dabbed his lips with his napkin. "A demonstration of control. What better way to remind people of their vulnerabilities than to show them how easily their sanctuaries can be trespassed?" "That is not control," Wolfe said, opening his eyes. "It is bluster. If you truly controlled memory, you would not need to send reminders. If you truly erased names, you would not need to leave threads of stitching. This," he pointed a heavy finger at Greening's plate, "is theater, and theater has an audience. Who are you trying to impress?" For the first time, Greening's composure slipped. It was small, but it was there. The way he tightened his grip on the fork, the faint twitch in the corner of his mouth. "I don't need to impress anyone," he said. "Pooh." Wolfe's tone carried contempt, the way thunder carries distance. "You need to impress someone. You chose me because you thought I would admire your craft. You were mistaken. I see artifice, yes, but clumsy artifice. Linen without folds is merely unnatural. Linen with stains is merely careless. You wish to suggest mastery, but all you have proven is that you can annoy housekeepers and unsettle managers." Greening set down his fork with deliberate precision. "Careful, Mr. Wolfe. I don't think you appreciate how delicate some of your clients' appetites are. One word in the wrong ear, one page out of place, and entire reputations tumble." "Then tumble they should," Wolfe said. "If their appetites cannot withstand daylight, they deserve extinction. I do not traffic in discretion. I traffic in truth. And truth, Mr. Greening, is one stain that does not fade." The room went still. Greening's smile thinned into something colder. He glanced at me, then back to Wolfe, and gave a small shake of his head. "You're every bit as immovable as they say. Perhaps that's why they fear you." "Not fear," Wolfe corrected. "Respect." There was a long pause, and then Greening pushed back his chair and stood. "I'll take my leave. Thank you for the dinner." "You will remain seated," Wolfe said quietly. He hadn't raised his voice, but it landed like a weight on the air. Greening froze, then laughed softly. "You don't give orders to me." "I already have," Wolfe said, and then turned his head toward me. "Archie." I was on my feet before Greening finished his laugh. "Sit," I told him, and though I didn't put a hand on him, the look I gave him carried all the encouragement he needed. He sat. Not willingly, but he sat. "Good," Wolfe said. "Now, you have admitted, in essence, that the intrusions were contrived. You have suggested that you profit by amplifying fear, but you have not explained the timing. Why now? Why send one napkin here to me? That was no mere advertisement. It was an invitation." Greening's eyes narrowed. He laced his fingers on the table as though to hide the tremor that wanted to start. "Because you're the only one they listen to. If I can unsettle you, Wolfe, I unsettle everyone who hides behind your shadow. If you can be made to see how fragile their lives are, they'll believe it twice over." "And yet," Wolfe said, "I remain unmoved, which leaves you with nothing but wasted linen and a failed performance." Greening's composure cracked then. He rose again, faster this time, his chair scraping across the rug. "You think you've won, but you haven't. Some folds never fade. You'll see." He was gone before I could stop him, moving with surprising speed. I made a step to follow, but Wolfe's voice pulled me back. "No," he said firmly. "Let him go. He has declared himself. The play will continue, and he cannot resist returning for his final act. We will prepare the stage." I looked at Wolfe, who had picked up his napkin and dabbed at his lips as though the conversation had been no more disturbing than a crumb. "You're sure he's not just walking out of the story?" Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, the corners of his mouth turning in the faintest expression of satisfaction. "No, Archie. He is writing himself deeper into it, and soon enough he will discover that I write the ending." I poured myself a glass of wine, because when Wolfe sounds that confident, it means someone else is about to fold, and it isn't going to be him. When Greening slammed the door behind him, the brown stone seemed to breathe out in relief, though I couldn't tell whether it was mine or the house's. I stood there waiting for Wolfe to give the word to chase, but he just leaned back and signaled for Fritz to clear the plates. If there's anything more aggravating than watching a guilty man walk out free, it's watching Wolfe ignore it as if he'd planned it that way. "He's rattled," I said. "That smile of his cracked right down the middle. If we tail him tonight, Saul or I could catch him talking to whoever's helping him plant his linen tricks." "No," Wolfe said. He pushed his plate forward an inch, which is the equivalent of ringing a dinner bell for Fritz. "He will not talk to anyone yet. He will act. We have made him conscious of his performance. He will need a new scene to reassert his cleverness." "Meaning?" "Meaning, Archie, before this week ends, there will be another trespass, and it will be more conspicuous." That wasn't a comfort, but it was Wolfe's version of prophecy. I poured myself a second glass of wine to wash down the frustration. Wolfe stayed in his chair long after dinner, eyes closed, fingers steepled, as if he were communing with a puzzle only he could see. At midnight I gave up, left him to his thoughts, and went upstairs. The call came at 9 the next morning. Lydia Marlowe's voice was taut as piano wire. "It happened again," she said. I motioned for Wolfe, who was at the table with corn cakes and honey to hold, but he waved me on. "In the dining room," she said. "All 20 tables were set before we closed. This morning, when the staff came in, every table had its napkin folded wrong. Not random, wrong. Triangle folds instead of rectangles. Exact, deliberate, every single one. No sign of entry. The locks are untouched. Anyone missing from staff roll call? No, and everyone swears they locked up last night. I told her we'd be there." Wolfe sighed like a man asked to exercise against his religion, but he gave in. At 11 sharp he abandoned the orchids, which was statement enough. Fritz summoned Browning to bring the car, and for once I had the fun of watching heads turn on the street as Wolfe himself emerged from the brownstone. It's an event rare enough to qualify as an eclipse. At the cloister room, Lydia met us pale but steady. The dining room was a gallery of precision gone wrong. Every table was dressed to perfection except for the napkins, each folded in that wrong triangle, a mockery of formality. The effect was eerie, like walking into a dream where nothing is broken but nothing is right. Wolfe took one table and lifted the linen with his heavy fingers. He examined the crease, sniffed the cloth, and replaced it. Then he turned slowly in a circle, his bulk dominating the room. "Archie," he said, "note the uniformity." He worked systematically, table by table. This was not done in haste. He had time and privacy. "Which means he had a key or he is staff," I said. "Precisely. And he chose the fold as his medium because it leaves no damage, only dissonance. He is consistent. He erases an emblem, preserves a stain, alters a fold. Always he plays with memory and order." Lydia clasped her hands. "What do I tell my staff? They're terrified. They think the place is cursed." "Tell them nothing," Wolfe said curtly. "The fewer explanations, the less he gleans from their panic. We will act." He turned to me. "Archie, bring Saul. He will watch tonight. Neri will be asked to lock the place as usual. Miss Marlowe, you will leave things untouched until then." On the way back, Wolfe closed his eyes in the car and rumbled, "This is no longer an annoyance. This is escalation. The man is making the cloister room his stage, but he still intends the final act to be here, in my house. We must be ready." That evening, Saul and I stationed ourselves in the cloister room after hours. Lydia had slipped us the keys, and Neri had done his usual lock-up routine. The dining room stood silent, every napkin still in its mocking triangle. We sat in the shadows, listening to the tick of the wall clock and the faint hum of the refrigeration in the kitchen. At 1:30, we heard it, the soft scrape of a key in the front lock. Saul gave me a look, and we went still. The door opened, and a figure slipped inside, moving with practiced ease. The man wore a long coat and a low-brimmed hat. He walked straight to the nearest table and adjusted the napkin, smoothing the fold as if rehearsing for an audience. Saul shifted forward, but I touched his arm. "Wait," I whispered. Wolfe wanted a performance. Let's see the show. The man moved from table to table, correcting each fold, smoothing it into perfect rectangles. When he reached the 10th table, he paused, pulled something from his pocket, and placed it under the napkin. A small square tin, the exact dimensions we'd measured on the sideboard. That was enough for Saul. He surged forward, and I followed. The man spun, eyes flashing under the brim of his hat. For a moment I thought he might bolt, but Saul had him by the arm before he could move. He struggled, tried to wrench free, but Saul's grip could hold a train. "Got you," Saul said. I reached up and yanked the hat off. The face underneath was sharp, pale, with lines etched by arrogance. Not greening, but familiar. Neri, the head waiter. His eyes burned with the kind of anger that thinks it's genius. "You don't understand," he hissed. "He promised me." "Save it for Wolfe," I said. "He collects promises and breaks them down for parts." We marched him out, tin in a pocket, and by 3 in the morning we had him in Wolfe's office. Wolfe sat, massive and implacable, as Neri twisted in the red chair. The tin sat on the desk between them like a relic. "So," Wolfe said softly, "the performer unmasks himself. You believed you were clever, Mr. Neri. Clever enough to fold linen, erase emblems, and unsettle your betters. Clever enough to play at memory." Neri's jaw tightened. "Greening said you'd admire it. He said if I made it precise enough, you'd see the art." "Pooh," Wolfe said with such contempt the room quivered. "You are no artist. You're a servant who mistook disruption for mastery, and Greening—" His eyes glinted. "Used you as his hand." Neri's face broke, anger spilling into desperation. He said I'd have a share. He said when the cloister room collapsed, he'd rebuild with me in charge. Wolfe closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose. Archie, call Mr. Kramer. He will want his thief and his evidence. Then prepare a note for Miss Marlowe. Her house is cleansed, though her partner is corrupt. Neri stiffened. You can't. I can, Wolfe said. You trespassed here, in my house, when you delivered that napkin. That alone seals your fate. As I dialed Kramer, Neri sagged in the chair, beaten. Wolfe remained unmoving, the mountain that does not fold. And I knew, as always, that in a world full of stains and creases, Wolfe was the one thing that never bent. Kramer arrived with the kind of face he reserves for cases he hasn't been properly briefed on, which is most of them. He took one look at Neri slouched in the red chair, the tin on Wolfe's desk, and me with the phone still dangling, and muttered something about insomnia being contagious. Saul had already gone to sleep on his feet against the wall, so it was left to me to give the inspector the outline. He listened with his mouth set in a grim line, only interrupting once to ask, Napkins? You're telling me we're up at 3 a.m. over napkins? Not just napkins, I said. Memory, intimidation, trespass. Ask Wolfe. He'll give you the deluxe sermon. I'd rather not, Kramer growled, but Wolfe opened his eyes anyway. You have your man, Wolfe said. He trespassed at the cloister room repeatedly, tampering with their linens to unsettle staff and patrons. He trespassed here in my office with his counterfeit napkin. He admitted collusion with Mr. Greening, who encouraged him with promises. Take him. Kramer eyed Neri, then back at Wolfe. Admitted, did he? In essence, Wolfe said. Archie can provide you the words if you insist on stenography. Neri straightened suddenly, his voice rising. You think I was the mastermind? You think Greening wasn't pulling every string? He told me what to do, when to do it. He said Wolfe had to be tested, that if Wolfe folded, the rest would too. His face had gone red, veins straining against his temples. I was just showing the signs. He was the one who wanted the collapse. Enough, Wolfe said coldly, and the word had the weight of a gavel. Inspector, you have your witness. Whether you believe him a puppet or a partner, his hand committed the act. Mr. Greening may follow, but you will not lose this one. Kramer puffed on the dead stub of a cigar he'd been nursing since arrival. I'll take him, he muttered. But if Greening's behind it, I'll need more than linen folds and bad poetry. He jerked his head, and the 2 plainclothes men he'd brought in led Neri out, still muttering about promises. The office sagged back into silence. Saul gave me a nod that said he'd done his part, and slipped out quietly. That left me and Wolfe, with the ghost of clove and lemon still faint in the room. You're not finished, I told him. Of course not, Wolfe said. Greening set the board. Neri was merely his pawn. Pawns are expended. The true test is yet to come. Then why let Kramer haul Neri off? If we kept him here, we might squeeze more. Pfui, the man has said enough. He will say more under pressure from the law, though he does not know it. His babble about Greening will reach the right ears. Meanwhile, Greening will learn his puppet has been taken, and he will feel the need to assert control once more. He cannot resist. He will return. I stretched, rubbed my eyes. You make it sound like we should just set the table and wait for him to walk in with dessert. That is precisely what we shall do, Wolfe said, and closed his eyes again. The next day dawned with no calls from Lydia and no fresh linen delivered to our door. Wolfe spent his morning with the orchids, as unflappable as ever, while I fielded Saul's report. Greening hadn't surfaced at the cloister room, hadn't been seen at his office, and his secretary swore he was traveling upstate. Too convenient. When I told Wolfe, he merely grunted. He is not gone, Wolfe said. He is preparing. His vanity demands a finale. By evening, I was pacing the office, waiting for something to happen. Wolfe sat content in his chair, Fritz moving silently through the kitchen beyond. At 8:30, the bell rang. I opened the door to find Lydia Marlowe standing stiffly, a folded square of linen in her hands. She came in quickly, eyes darting. "It was waiting on my desk this morning. I didn't call sooner because I didn't know what to think." She placed the linen on Wolfe's desk. It was folded into a perfect rectangle, but across the center ran a line of dark thread, stitched crudely, zigzag, ugly. Wolfe leaned forward, studied it, and exhaled slowly. So, he marks the fold itself. Crude, but emphatic. The message is plain. Some folds are meant never to be erased. Lydia's voice was low. "My staff is in panic. They whisper about curses. Mr. Wolfe, if you don't resolve this soon, the cloister room will be ruined." "It is already compromised," Wolfe said. "But not by Napkins. By Mr. Greening." Her face tightened. "Then you believe Nery's claim?" "I believe Greening sought to unsettle his own house to justify control, or to pave the way for its ruin and rebirth under his sole hand. But his pride has outstripped his discretion. He wishes to impress me, and in doing so he exposes himself. Tonight, Miss Marlowe, you will summon your partner here. Tell him it is urgent, concerning the safety of your club. Do not mention me. Simply say you require him." She hesitated. "He'll suspect." "Good," Wolfe said. "Suspicion will bring him faster." After she left, Wolfe instructed Fritz to prepare the dining room again. "We will meet him at the table, Archie, as before. But this time we shall not let him rise until he is finished." At 10, the bell rang again. Greening entered, coat buttoned, face calm but taut beneath the surface. He looked at me, then at Wolfe, and smiled, without warmth. "So Lydia brings me here," he said softly. "I suppose you've decided I'm the villain in your play." "You decided that yourself," Wolfe said, unmoving. "Sit." He did, though slower than before. Fritz served nothing this time, only water. The air was thick enough. "You sent your waiter to fold napkins," Wolfe said. "You encouraged him with promises you never intended to keep. You delivered linen to me to invite me into your theater. Now your pawn is removed, your club trembles, and still you posture." "Why?" Greening's lips curled. "Because I wanted you to see it, Wolfe. To see that even order itself can be bent, creased, erased. Everyone fears it, everyone but you. I wanted to prove you could be unsettled." "And have you?" Wolfe asked. Greening's eyes gleamed. "Haven't I?" "No," Wolfe said flatly. "You have only proven that you cannot resist showing your hand. And now, Mr. Greening, it is time to reveal precisely what you hoped to gain, by tearing your own house asunder." Greening's smile faltered. He looked at the glass of water, then at me, then back at Wolfe. And for the first time I saw real unease in him. He had walked into the brownstone certain he was staging the final act, only to realize Wolfe was already writing the script. Greening shifted in his chair, the water glass untouched before him. The smile that had been his armor the night before was thinner now, stretched across his face like paint over cracked plaster. Wolfe hadn't moved an inch, but the weight of his stillness pressed on the room like a hand on the back of the neck. I leaned against the globe stand, waiting, because Wolfe had set the trap, and all we had to do was watch Greening decide whether he wanted to gnaw off his own leg or confess. "You think I staged it all for some petty scheme," Greening said finally, his voice a shade lower than before. "Do you know what the cloister room costs to run? What it bleeds every month for the privilege of staying exclusive? I don't sabotage my own livelihood, Mr. Wolfe. I protect it." Wolfe's lids lowered halfway. "By terrorizing your patrons with parlor tricks?" "They aren't parlor tricks," Greening snapped, and his hand twitched near the glass before pulling back. "They're reminders. The men and women who come to the cloister room, they live their lives believing everything can be folded away neatly. Affairs, debts, alliances. A tidy crease, and no one sees the mess beneath. I gave them a taste of what happens when the folds don't hold. Do you know how much more they paid for discretion after that stain? After those wrong folds? Membership doubled. Fees tripled. They begged for protection. Ah, Wolfe exhaled, almost like a sigh. So you increased their fear in order to increase their dependence. A crude extortion disguised as elegance. Greening's pale eyes flared. Not extortion. Insurance. I simply sold them the reassurance they were desperate to buy. Neri was ambitious and clumsy, yes, but he was useful. He could carry out the gestures without realizing the full shape of the plan. If he hadn't been caught, they'd all still be paying, and the cloister room would have been stronger than ever. And when he was caught? I asked, stepping closer. Greening's smile returned, but weaker, as though it had to be hauled up by ropes. Then I had to improvise. That stitched fold Lydia brought, yes, mine, a reminder to her, to all of you. Some creases never fade, the ones in reputation, in memory. She thought she could run the club clean, but there is no such thing. They need me, Wolfe. Without me, it all collapses. Wolfe's voice was dry as dust. You presume, sir, that what you have done is ingenious. It is not. It is the oldest stratagem in commerce. Create the danger, then sell the cure. Your error was arrogance, believing you could parade your charlatanry before me and receive admiration. Instead, you receive exposure. Greening stiffened. You can't expose me. You have nothing but napkins and talk. No jury will convict me for folding linen wrong. Pfui. Wolfe opened his eyes fully now, and the weight of his gaze seemed to make the man shrink. You mistake me. My purpose is not conviction. It is revelation. You will be undone not by law but by light. Archie. That was my cue. I opened the drawer and pulled out the small black recorder I'd placed there hours earlier, at Wolfe's instruction. I clicked it off and set it on the desk between them. Greening's face went ashen. Your admissions, Wolfe said calmly, regarding the stain, the fold, the extortion of your members, they are preserved. Miss Marlowe will hear them. Inspector Kramer will hear them. Your patrons, should it come to that, will hear them. And the cloister room, with its vaunted discretion, will fold upon you like wet paper. Greening lurched half out of his chair. You can't. I can. Wolfe cut him off. And I have. You may attempt to bluster or to buy, but you cannot erase your own voice. For the first time, Greening looked genuinely afraid. His hands trembled as they clutched the chair arms. He searched for his smile, couldn't find it, and instead leaned forward, almost pleading. Wolfe, listen, you don't understand. Those men, their appetites, their secrets, if they believe I betrayed them, they won't just ruin me. They'll destroy everything. They'll come after anyone who knows. That, Wolfe said softly, is not my concern. You chose your game. Now you must endure its consequence. I thought for a second Greening would hurl himself at the desk, grab the recorder, do something reckless. But the fight drained out of him all at once, like a punctured wineskin. He sank back down, staring at the glass of water, and when he spoke again his voice was hoarse. So what now? You hand me to Kramer? You watch me rot in a cell while the cloister room tears itself apart? No, Wolfe said. You will hand yourself over. You will resign your interest in the cloister room to Miss Marlowe and withdraw. Quietly. You will make restitution to those you extorted. Again, quietly. You will do so because the alternative is public ruin. Inspector Kramer will be provided with enough to keep you under his eye, but not to prosecute unless you fail to comply. Greening swallowed, his throat working. And if I don't? Then the recording is not merely played. It is published. Wolfe's voice was calm, precise. Your choice, Mr. Greening. Oblivion in silence, or annihilation in noise. For a long moment, Greening sat frozen, then he nodded once, sharp as a brake. Fine. I'll do it. You will, Wolfe said. Archie will draft the necessary documents. You will sign them tonight. Fritz will summon a notary. I pulled paper and pen, though part of me wondered if Greening would try to bolt. But he didn't. He sat, defeated, while I wrote. His signature scratched across the pages with a hand that had stopped pretending to be steady. When it was done, Wolfe leaned back again, eyelids lowering. "You may leave now. You will not return." Greening rose slowly, as if a string had been cut. He didn't look at me, or at Wolfe. He just walked out, the sound of the front door closing behind him more final than a gavel. The room settled into silence. I slid the documents into a folder and capped my pen. "You think he'll follow through?" "Yes," Wolfe murmured. "Men who trade in fear are themselves ruled by it. He has seen the iron, Archie. He will not test it again." I poured myself a drink because the air was thick with endings. Wolfe closed his eyes fully now, satisfied. And I thought about Greening's words, about folds that never fade, about stains that linger. He wasn't wrong, but he had made the mistake of testing them against the one man who never bends. And Nero Wolfe had folded him instead. The folder with Greening's signature sat on Wolfe's desk like a tombstone for ambition. I'd seen plenty of men walk out of this office convinced they still had cards to play, but Greening wasn't one of them. He hadn't so much left as he had dissolved, like a stain finally scrubbed out after it had overstayed its welcome. Wolfe, of course, didn't savor the victory. He just rang for Fritz and ordered beer, as if the matter had been nothing more than indigestion. I stayed restless, though, because I knew we weren't at the end yet. Neri was in custody. Greening had folded, but the cloister room was still bleeding, and Lydia was still waiting for a reckoning she could trust. The following morning, Lydia herself arrived, summoned by Wolfe's terse note. She came in brisk, her grey eyes sharper now, no longer the weary ones of a woman cornered, but the steady ones of a manager holding on to a lifeline. Wolfe motioned her to the red chair. "Your partner," Wolfe began without ceremony, "has conceded his position. He will withdraw. The cloister room will be yours to govern." Lydia's lips parted, but she didn't speak right away. She studied Wolfe as if trying to read whether he ever embellished the truth. "So it's finished?" she asked. "No," Wolfe said, and I saw her flinch slightly at the word. "The acts are finished, but the residue remains. You must cleanse your house. Staff will whisper, patrons will fret. If you allow either, the ruin will not be Greening's. It will be yours." Lydia sat straighter, her chin lifting. "And how do I cleanse it?" Wolfe closed his eyes, fingers steepled. "By honesty, a quiet, precise honesty. Announce that Mr. Greening has chosen to retire from the business. Attribute no scandal, no betrayal, only fatigue. Then, without comment, remove Neri's name from your rolls. Hire no replacements. For several weeks. The absence of noise will speak louder than any denial." "That's it?" I asked, leaning forward. "We've been breaking our backs, untangling linen, and the grand solution is silence." Wolfe didn't even open his eyes. "Yes, Archie. Silence is the balm. Miss Marlowe, your patrons crave the illusion of stability. Give it to them and they will cling all the tighter to your house." Lydia let out a breath. Relief, maybe, or something close enough to it. "You've saved us," she said, her voice steadier now. "You and—" She glanced at me. "Mr. Goodwin." "Fui," Wolfe muttered, which I translated in my head to mean, "Accept your gratitude, but do not overindulge in it." She signed a document Wolfe had prepared, transferring Greening's share into her name, witnessed by me, and when she left, she looked taller than when she'd entered. After she was gone, Wolfe reached for his beer. "There," he said. "The matter is closed." "Closed?" I repeated. "We've still got Neri in custody, ranting about promises, and Greening skulking around, hoping no one whispers his name. How is that closed?" "Because," Wolfe said, "the point was not the men. It was the trespass. My house was used as a stage. That is intolerable. The one who delivered the napkin is undone. The one who directed him has bent. That suffices. I wanted to argue, but there's no use arguing with a mountain. Instead, I went to the phone and called Saul to give him the rap. He chuckled low, the way he does when a case ends with Wolfe's iron touch. So the fat man squashed them flat again, he said. You could sell tickets. By the time evening came, the brownstone was back to its sacred rhythm, Wolfe with his orchids, Fritz in the kitchen humming, the clatter of plates being set for dinner. I felt the itch of unfinished business, but knew better than to voice it. Wolfe was satisfied, and when Wolfe is satisfied, the world has to settle for it. We ate roast duck that night with Fritz's bread pudding for dessert. The air smelled of cinnamon instead of clove, which felt like a benediction. Wolfe dabbed his lips with his napkin, the properly folded kind, of course, and leaned back in his chair. Archie, he said, what have you learned? I grinned. That napkins are more trouble than they're worth. Pfui. You have learned that order, however trivial, is a symbol of greater things. To crease wrongly is to declare oneself. To erase a fold is to pretend history can be obliterated, and to stain is to remind us of permanence. These men thought themselves clever by using linen as metaphor. They were children playing at philosophy. Real order is not in folds or stains, but in principles. I raised my glass. So the principle is we won. Wolfe gave me the faintest nod. Yes, and now we dine. The case was done, though I'll admit I slept lightly that night. Greening's voice echoed in my head about folds that never fade. Maybe he was right, in his way. Maybe there are creases in life that no iron can smooth. But I knew one thing for certain. He'd tried to crease Wolfe, and Wolfe hadn't even bent. By morning, the brownstone was itself again, silent except for the orchids upstairs and the scrape of Fritz's whisk in the kitchen. Another trespass had come and gone, and once more Wolfe had proved that the only true permanence lies not in stains or folds, but in the mind of a man who refuses to move. I sat at my desk with my notebook, writing it all down while the house returned to its calm. Cases come and go, clients too, but Wolfe remains. And maybe, just maybe, that's the one fold in life that will never fade. By noon the next day, the brownstone had settled into its old geometry. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids, conducting diplomacy with the Vandas, and Fritz was submitting a roast to the arithmetic of heat. I was at my desk, writing up the account for the file. If anyone ever wonders what it's like to live in a house where a man refuses to be moved, tell them it sounds like pencil on paper and the faint tick of a clock that knows better than to hurry. At 1:30 the phone rang. Kramer's voice came through like gravel deciding whether to be a landslide. He didn't offer pleasantries. He never does unless he's discovered a new brand of indigestion. Goodwin, your waiter sang, he said. First he croaked, then he sang. Your boy Neri corroborates what you fed me. Greening first, tricks second. He's sticking to the line that he was demonstrating vulnerability to raise the take. No blood, no broken glass, just linen and nerves. You going to box it? I asked. Maybe, he said. I can't haul Greening on a chorus and a napkin, but I can keep him on a short leash while Miss Marlowe rearranges her furniture. Neri goes up on burglary, trespass, tampering. Judge will like the pattern. I'll like the pattern. Tell Wolfe I'm not happy, but I'm satisfied, which is as close as he ever lets me get to joy. I thanked him and hung up. When Wolfe came down at 2, I relayed it between coffee and corn cakes. He listened, eyes closed, mouth making that small, private shape that means the world has conformed to his expectations, which is rare and therefore restful. Inspector Kramer, he said, is a conscientious man. He dislikes what he cannot touch, but he is not blind. It will suffice. He reached for his beer, then paused, frowning at the desk. The manila envelope with the defiant napkin sat there where it had lived since the beginning, a square of innocence that refused to remember it had ever been anything else. He nudged it with a fingertip. "Archie, return that to Miss Marlowe." "As an exhibit," I said. "As an admonition," he said. "She may frame it or burn it. Either will serve." I was reaching for the envelope when the doorbell chimed, its modest opinion. I went and found a boy in a cap holding a narrow parcel and a clipboard. He had the look of someone who'd learned to run before he learned to read. "Delivery for Mr. Wolfe," he said, and made sure the receipt line found my pencil. Back in the office, I set the parcel on Wolfe's blotter. He scowled at the interruption. He always does until interruptions earn their keep, and flicked his eyes at me. I sliced the string and folded back the paper. Inside was a flat wooden box with a sliding lid, simple and handsome. I slid, and out came a linen napkin, yes, another, folded in a classic rectangle so perfect it could have tutored the others. In the corner, not unpicked but newly stitched, sat an emblem, not CR, not initials at all, but a small, neat asterisk in dark thread. Tucked beneath it was a card, heavy stock, no signature. 5 words. Some folds are worth learning. I don't claim I'm the quick one in the house. That would be news to both of us. But I had the donor and 2 guesses and 1. "Lydia," I said. Wolfe's eyebrow agreed. He lifted the linen, weighed its hand, and set it down. "Competent work," he said. "Irish, as before, and the stitcher is not the man who removed the old emblem. A steadier spine." I turned the card on its edge. "An epilogue. She's telling us she has it in hand." "She is telling herself," Wolfe said, "and doing it here makes it true." I slid the new napkin back into its box and filed the card. The house felt different by 2 ounces. The weight of a problem turned into a souvenir. Fritz announced lunch, and we went to the table, where the roast had achieved its destiny, and the bread had arguments with the butter that only ended in unanimity. We ate, which is how Wolfe prefers to punctuate conclusions. After lunch, the afternoon tried to be ordinary, and nearly got away with it. Saul called at 4 to report that Greening had been seen entering a midtown bank and leaving lighter. The notary's ink had apparently motivated the man's wallet to virtue. "He'll keep his head down," Saul said. "Vanity's got a bruise where you put your thumb on it." "Good," Wolfe said, and hung up. At 5, the phone rang again. This time it was Lydia. Her voice had edges, but they were clean. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, "I did as you instructed. We have announced Mr. Greening's retirement and said nothing else. Staff meeting was brief. I removed Nery's name from the schedule and his key from the board. No flourishes, no epigrams. There was quiet. I've never been more grateful for quiet." "You will have more," Wolfe said. "The noise he made will decay. Repetition is the only enemy of panic, and you will provide none." "You have my gratitude," she said, and hung up before I could offer mine. Lydia strikes me as the sort who gives thanks like a tip, correctly, without show. We had an hour before dinner. I used it to tidy the file and sharpen the pencils Wolfe likes me to sharpen because order comforts him, and the sight of me working comforts his vanity about industry. He sat with his eyes closed, which is how he reads the little book that never leaves his head. At 7, with Fritz's soup steaming like the end of a sermon, we sat again. The routine returned like a tide. It was after espresso. Fritz has lately contrived a machine that wheezes like a gentleman with opinions, that Wolfe set down his cup and gave me one of his rare, flat looks that precede something he is going to say whether I'm ready or not. "Archie," he said, "you remarked that the solution was silence. It was not. It was proportion." "I'll buy," I said, "if you define the term for the class." He shifted, only a fraction. These men believe that because linen can be creased, life can be. They mistook a symbol for a mechanism. When symbols are used to coerce, They must be put back in proportion. Truth weighs more than theatre. Appetite weighs more than fear. A house weighs more than the whispering it hears. When the scale is balanced, silence follows, but it is the balance that matters. I'll pass that along, I said, with diagrams. Do, he said, and closed his eyes. And note one more thing. Always. The napkin with no fold, he said. It was not an erasure. It was a refusal. Erasures leave scars. He made a small, contemptuous noise. Our visitor wanted us to see mastery where there was only impersonation. The refusal told me more. Linen that has lived remembers. It is the same with men. I thought of Greening's smile, and of Nery's sharp, pale face, and of Lydia's hands on her desk as she steadied a house that had learned to wobble for money. I thought of Wolfe, who does not wobble, and of this room that strangers try to turn into a stage until the stage turns them into scenery. I'll note it, I said. He nodded, and that was the end of philosophy for the evening. Fritz brought brandy, and I lit a cigarette and stood at the window to listen to the city. Out on 35th, taxis folded around corners and the sky creased into night. Somewhere, a siren did its moral arithmetic. In the kitchen, Fritz hummed, and upstairs, the orchids breathed, indifferent to human metaphors. When I put out the light on my desk, the manila envelope was gone. I'd put it by the door to take to the cloister room in the morning. The wooden box with the new emblem sat on the bookshelf, not displayed, not hidden. That felt right. The case had started with an absence and ended with a tidy mark that meant nothing except what we assigned it. That's life most days. What you fold, what you stain, what you leave alone. Before I turned in, I asked the last question that was still itching. If Lydia hadn't sent that napkin, I said, what would you have done with the empty one? Keep it, burn it. Neither, Wolfe said, without opening his eyes. Use it. For what? He exhaled, the nearest he comes to a smile. For dinner, which in Wolfe's house is philosophy with a knife and fork. We went to bed under a sky that had unfolded itself into a clean sheet. In the morning, breakfast would be hot, the orchids would be expecting him, the doorbell would try its luck, and the brownstone would keep its shape. There are folds that never fade. Not all of them are threats. Some are the lines by which a life is kept. The brownstone was quiet again, the kind of quiet that meant everything had returned to its ordained orbit. Fritz humming in the kitchen, Wolfe in his chair, the orchids waiting upstairs for their audience, and me at the desk, making sense of the whole circus in ink. Outside, the city still folded itself into 100 creases of ambition and appetite, but inside, the lines had straightened. Greening had retreated, signature on paper and pride in tatters, and he wouldn't be back. Neri would spend the foreseeable future contemplating laundry marks through iron bars. Lydia had steadied the cloister room, turning its silence into strength instead of fear. And Wolfe, as always, had done it without rising from his chair, except once to taste a sauce. That's the part people never understand. They think the show is in the chase, the fist fights, the narrow escapes. But here the chase ends before it begins, because Wolfe sets the finish line inside his own head. The rest of us just run to keep up. Greening thought he could make Wolfe fold with linen tricks, with stains and vanishing emblems, with whispers about fear. But you can't fold a mountain. Wolfe didn't bend. He never does. I closed my notebook and looked across the room. Wolfe's eyes were shut, his fingers steepled, his mouth set in that line that means he's not sleeping, just thinking in a language the rest of us don't speak. I've lived long enough in this house to know the rhythm. After a storm, the silence isn't just silence. It's victory. I lit a cigarette and went to the window. East 35th was the same as it always was. Cabs nosing for fares, a kid on a bike zigzagging between them, dusk settling like a folded cloth over the skyline. The world had returned to its proper creases. Behind me, Wolfe spoke, not loud, not even opening his eyes. "Archie." "Yes?" "Do not keep that empty napkin in the files. It has no meaning now. If it is to be used, it should be used." I smiled around the cigarette. "For dinner?" "Of course," he said. And that was it. Case closed, folded neat. Another trespass set straight. The brownstone breathed steady again, its order intact. I flicked ash into the tray and thought, not for the first time, that for all the stains the world tries to leave, for all the folds that pretend to vanish, the one truth that never fades is this: Nero Wolfe sits, and the rest of us learn to stand where we're told. And somewhere in that balance, justice holds.